Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we've got another review. We're going to be reviewing this 2016 Corvette Z06. So now before we actually start off, probably the first thing that you guys are noticing, and the first thing that I noticed about this car is that it looks very familiar to a ZR1, but it actually is again a C7 Z06. And this Z06 actually did come with the stage 3 aero performance like Z07 package. And the owner actually did opt to go for the ZR1 like front bumper as well as the ZR1 wing in the back, because he actually does track this thing. And the first few times when he actually took it out on the track and it had like the regular Z06 bumper, like it was really like running really hot, and he was getting a lot of heat soak. And you guys can see like right off the bat that the ZR1 front bumper has a lot of holes right there, right in the center of the car, for a lot of wind flow, a lot of cooling. And if you guys can actually see, the owner on both sides of the car actually did add the extra radiators on both sides that actually come with the ZR1. So this car does have the extra coolers from the ZR1, and I believe he is also running Evans waterless coolant in this thing. So basically an ongoing theme I guess you're going to be seeing with this car as I talk about it is that pretty much all the mods that this owner did do to this car is all focused on cooling. I mean, obviously, the ZR1 front bumper with the big wing, it looks really cool, but again, the owner mainly did it for its function over its form. It's not like he just liked the look or whatever. This front bumper, and actually the wing for that matter, does definitely serve a purpose on the track. So now that being said, guys, obviously this is the Z06, so it definitely is, it looks and it also drives a lot more aggressive than the two Z51 C7 Corvettes that I actually did reviews on in the past. Now the two Z51 Corvettes were also that 7-speed manual transmission that comes in these C7 Corvettes, but this is actually the 8-speed automatic, has a shiftable automatic in it, which is another really cool feature for this car. And before we actually move on from the body of this car, I did just want to give you guys a couple dimensions. So this thing does have a curb weight just over 3,500 pounds, right at 3,524 pounds. Now given the bigger ZR1 wing on the back, as well as some of the added weight coming from like some of the aero bits here and there, I honestly don't know how much those added like aero pieces would add. But again, the stock C7 Z06 curb weight is just over 3,500 pounds and does have a wheelbase of 106.7 inches and a height right under 50 inches at 48.6 inches. It is, pretty low to the ground. Now, I did just want to kind of do an overview of the Z07 performance package that this car actually comes with. It does include the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires. The owner actually doesn't have them on right now because they're pretty much slicks. But he does have the stock Z06 tires, which are the same dimensions as the Pilot Sport Cup 2s. So in the front, they are 285s by 30s by 19s. And then in the rear, they are 335s by 25s by 20s. And actually going around the other side, just because the sunlight's hitting the other side of this thing. So another really cool feature about this is the really huge carbon ceramic rotors on this thing. And in the front, this thing actually has 394 by 33 millimeter rotors, and in the back they are 388 by 33 millimeter rotors. And again, they are carbon ceramic rotors. I believe it's 4 piston calipers in the front as well, and it actually also looks like 4 piston calipers in the rear as well. So pretty damn big brakes, but again, you definitely need that when you're on the track. And actually moving on to the rear here, I did actually switch over to my GoPro just to kind of capture the width of this ZR1 wing. I know some people might not I guess like it. They might think it's a little bit too much, but I absolutely love this thing. It is very aggressive. You can tell that it's aftermarket, like it's I guess a little bit different from factory. I actually don't think these little points here come from factory. I could be wrong though. This could be like exactly the same as the the stock ZR1 wing, but I do really like it. It's really wide, it's really aggressive, and again, it does actually serve a purpose because these things are actually tested in wind tunnel by Chevy. And again, it might be slightly off from the stock specs for the wing, but the aftermarket company that actually makes the swing might actually, you know, have it 100% accurate. So again, it does serve a purpose, and me personally, I actually really like the look of it. And I also do really like the look of kind of like the gloss black exterior trim all around this car. It definitely does complement the kind of bright exterior paint color very well. All right guys, so now we have the hood popped on this C7 Z06, and underneath the hood you can see the 6.2 liter supercharged small block LT4 V8, and it does have that next gen Eden supercharger slapped on top. Now before we actually start talking about the, I guess, stock engine or whatever, I did just want to mention a couple of the upgrades that the owner did do underneath here. Nothing too crazy. Pretty much on the top here, he did switch that out for a 2017 model or whatever. Pretty much it does have, like, he said it had upgraded intercoolers from the 2016 model. You can see the cold air intake kind of going right to the fender there. That also is wrapped as well. And also, I don't know if you guys can see it, but the headers down here, he did get the full exhaust coated in like this kind of paint coating. It basically just helps out with the heat, helps out with the heat soak. So again, like those 3 more modifications were just a couple of the things that just really helped with the cooling of this overall, you know, engine bay, because again, the owner was experiencing a lot of heat soak. So now that being said, this engine actually does have the same cylinder deactivation found in the base C7 Corvettes, as well as other new General Motors or Chevy vehicles, such as like the newer Escalade. I've been in a newer Escalade before, and it's just really cool how the cylinder deactivation works, because pretty much once you get up to like highway speeds and you're cruising and it's at low RPMs and you're in a higher gear, it'll actually shut off like 4 of the 8 cylinders. I don't know which ones in particular. Definitely let me know down in the comments below if you know. But it'll actually shut off 4 of its 8 cylinders and kind of only run on 4 cylinders to save, you know, gas and, you know, kind of up the gas mileage. And now that being said, this is a 2 valve per cylinder engine, which was a little bit surprising to me, because I do know in the other LTs or whatever, like they are also 2 valves per cylinders. But again, you are seeing a lot of, like, you know, newer engines that are 4 valves per cylinder. And that being said, guys, this engine actually does make a peak 650 foot-pounds of torque at 3,600 RPMs and 650 brake horsepower at 6,400 RPMs, which, you know, does produce a very even power output as you're kind of like going up on the dyno sheet, I guess, if you had a dyno sheet of a stock Z06. And it actually does deliver that power through a 8-speed automatic transmission, and you can actually see the paddle shifters here in the interior right on the steering wheel. And the owner actually did say that he really likes the automatic transmission when compared to the 7-speed manual found in these cars, because the automatic, actually the top 2 gears are overdrives, whereas in the manual, the top 4 out of the 7 gears are actually overdrives. So in this one, you have pretty much the gear ratio is a lot closer between the gears for this 8-speed automatic transmission, which is very good for track days. So now that being said, guys, this thing actually does have pretty decent gas mileage as well, for something pretty much almost pushing close to like 700 horsepower. This thing's gas mileage gets 15 miles per gallon during city driving, 22 miles per gallon during highway driving, for a combined average of 18 miles per gallon. And it does have an 18.5 fuel tank as well, so it has a range of 277 city miles, as well as a little over 400 highway miles. Now again, moving on to the interior here, you can see the paddle shifters that I did just mention about. And overall, I really like the interior of these C7 Corvettes. And this specific Z06 is actually the like ZL1 trim or the LT1 trim. It's pretty much just the base trim, so it doesn't have all the, I guess, added comfort creatures that you have in like the LT2 or the LT3 or like the higher trims. But again, the owner doesn't really care about that. Hey, this is mainly like a track car, and it definitely is a lot of fun. So now that being said, guys, I'm gonna hook up the GoPro and then we're gonna take this thing for a drive, and I'll show you guys my initial reactions. Guys, so now we're actually driving this 2016 Z06, and I have to say, like, right off the bat, I'm driving it in the kind of track mode, and I do have it in manual right now, and the paddle shifters are like exceptional for this thing. It's probably the best automatic car that I've driven with like the least amount of like delay or whatever. Now mind you, I haven't really necessarily driven an automatic car of this caliber yet, but again, like it is very, very responsive. Again, I did drive the GT2 RS, but technically it's an automated manual, pretty much automatic. This almost feels like that with response time. It's very, very instantaneous. And right now we are sitting at a red light, so I can't really talk much about the car, but I did drive it around the park that we were in, and it's super, super stiff. The seat holds you in very good. I mean, this for the most part, I believe the seats and again, like all the other pieces of the interior are very similar to the two other C7s that I did reviews on. And if you haven't seen that, I'll probably leave the link on the top of the video throughout this video. But I initially did a review on a C7 Z51, and then I did a review on a C7 Premier Edition, which is pretty much the same as the Z51 mechanically, except it's, you know, like one of 500 that were made. It's like the launch edition of the car. But you can definitely, like, right off the bat tell the difference between this car and those two C7s, because those two C7s, again, we're making like the stock power for the Z51, so somewhere around like 400 or something horsepower, and this is almost 700, so you can tell like that this thing wants to go. And for the most part, the gas is like, it's not too responsive. Like, it's really not hard to drive. It's a pretty forgiving car, but I can only imagine, like, when you actually get on it, it can definitely bite you in the ass if you're not careful, for sure. Yeah. Oh my god. And that was just like a little bit, and obviously we're in, you know, a residential area, so I'm not gonna go crazy, but like that downshift, super instantaneous. It's very crisp. And again, this is like the stock exhaust. I guess, I don't know if you'd really call it a sound mod or whatever, but the exhaust is, you know, coated in that like powder coating or whatever for the heat. But for the most part, this is just the factory exhaust, and it is in track mode, so it is the loudest setting. So I actually, the owner did just switch it over to track mode. It initially was in touring, but now the actual entire car is track mode, so that's another interesting thing, because the exhaust has, like, basically you can have it on track mode and touring like we just had it, but now it's on track fully, and you can tell the suspension is even tighter. The steering is super stiff, and it's just, the car is like lowered, so it's just very low to the ground, and I do have to be careful with that front splitter, so that's obviously why I'm not driving like an idiot right now. But if I downshift and kind of take this corner with a little bit, yeah. And then the brakes are just right there too. The brakes are actually almost, the brake pedal's a lot more responsive than the gas pedal, to be completely honest with you. But I'm trying to be very, very, you know, easy on the gas, because something like this, especially with the chassis of the C7 Corvettes, the chassis it's not really it's not really smooth. I mean, you definitely get like a muscle car brutal feel when driving something like this, and even when driving like the Z51 Stingrays that I drove in the past, they're just very rigid. They feel like American muscle, but at the same time, it does have all the modern technology and all the really cool things that I was talking about when I was talking about the drivetrain, and you could really like tear up the track in this thing. That was in fourth gear, kind of like a higher gear, not really giving it at all, and you can just, like, the rumble is amazing in this car. Personally, like, this thing would sound cool if it maybe, like, you know, it didn't have cats or whatever. It'd definitely be a lot louder, but just the factory exhaust, how it is, sounds amazing. And another thing that's really awesome is the kind of dashboard right here, as well as the heads-up display. The owner has it configured to basically how he wants it, and it shows the engine temp. Again, cooling is a really important factor for this owner, because he does track this thing. So you have the engine temp, the oil pressure, the battery voltage or whatever, and then the tire pressure just says okay for the tire pressure. But it's really cool how you can kind of configure this thing basically how you want it as the owner and as the driver. So now one thing about this heads-up display too, I'm a little bit taller than the owner, so the heads-up display was actually kind of like disappearing, but you can actually adjust it, which is really, really cool. And me personally, I'm pretty sure I've said this in my other Corvette reviews, or maybe the one Camaro RS that I did, but I really don't like the heads-up display that Chevy, puts in the newer vehicles. I know a lot of people do like it, but I don't know, maybe it's just not for me. But it is pretty cool, especially like when you're driving this thing at night. You don't really have to take your eyes off the road because it's right there. Yeah. Oh my God. And you can tell, like, now that I've been driving it for a little bit, the first couple times I did that, you heard the, or the first couple times like the owner was driving, you heard the kind of rocks getting picked up. It was starting to heat up a little bit, and now you can tell the tires are a little bit warmer, and it actually is very controllable. So another interesting thing about this car, now again, I am driving it in the manual mode. It is, the 8-speed automatic, but I'm driving it in manual mode. And the owner actually did say previously that when you're driving it in automatic and you kind of, punch it like this, it'll downshift like multiple gears, and it does get very uncontrollable very quickly. So I'm gonna keep it in manual, after hearing that, because I like that when you're in manual, you just have a lot of control of this car. And you can probably tell because I'm like bouncing all over, but with the track suspension going over some bumps in the road, it's definitely not the most comfortable thing in the world. But again, I mean, it's amazing how Chevy can make something like this where it has a touring, a sport, or like a wet mode, and it's just a lot more comfortable. It's basically like a daily driver, but then when it's in track mode, it's something like this where it's literally ready to be taken out on the track, ready to be beat up, but at the same time you go over like little bumps and it's bringing you airborne in the seat. But anyways, I'm kind of like rambling on and on, but my main point that I want to get across is that it's really cool how the technology has come this far, where manufacturers can make one car that feels like 3 or 5 different cars depending on the driving mode. This compared to like the Hellcat that I drove, which was again 700 horsepower, and even the GT2 that I drove, well, the Hellcat was a lot heavier than the GT2, as well as this Z06, so it kind of slowed it down a little bit. But this thing is extremely refined, just like the GT2. Now that being said, when it is in track mode, it is very stiff. And since that, I'm basically just filming a review on this car, and I've only driven it in my entire life for X amount of minutes, I don't have full control and full, I guess, connection to the car. So going around corners, I'm definitely not going to push this thing at all, because I just don't trust myself or the car for that matter. But for the most part, again, when it's in manual, it's very, very controllable. And right now I'm in 5th gear, doing a little over 40 miles per hour, and it's just cruising right under 2,000 RPMs. And even though it's in that track exhaust option right now, it's fairly quiet. Now I believe and so now, since I was kind of just cruising right there, the owner helped me out, but we just put it back into the auto exhaust mode as well as the touring driving mode. And this thing, it feels like driving something that's meant to just be daily driven, and it's just very smooth and relaxed. The suspension is nice and floaty now. The steering is very easy, whereas the track, the steering was much more, there was a lot more resistance when steering it in track, but again, it was just much tighter overall when it was in track mode. Alright guys, well that's pretty much just going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I had an absolute blast driving this 2016 Z06 today, and I did want to remind you guys, I didn't say it at the beginning of the video, but I am doing my very first giveaway on the channel. Basically, once we hit 1,500 subscribers, I'm going to be giving away $100 worth of my merchandise to one subscriber and one subscriber only. And all you have to do to get entered is subscribe to my channel, and it's absolutely free and helps me out a lot. So, like always guys, thank you for all the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one.